Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to talk about BH Cosmetics. Now if you'll remember correctly, the last time we talked about BH Cosmetics was when their festival palette came out. And I wasn't quite convinced that BH Cosmetics had found a fantastic formula that was going to stay consistent throughout their line. Well, they have a new palette out. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at it and see if the last couple of palettes have just been a fluke, or if BH Cosmetics is really as good as all of that. So if that's something you're interested in watching, you're in the right place. We're about to get into it.
I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf.
Alright guys, so BH Cosmetics. Back in the day, they used to have those palettes that were in metal tins, and I'm pretty sure that they still have those. And I ordered a couple of them and did not like the formula at all. I thought it was garbage, was not impressed with it. Then the Zodiac Palette came out, and I kept hearing everyone going on and on and on about this palette. So I decided to get it. And for those of you that don't remember, I'll put the review up here somewhere so that you guys can revisit it. But this was a palette that genuinely blew me away. At the time, I got this on sale for like $14. I think now you can purchase it for like $21, $22. I would absolutely say that it's worth it. This is one of the best shimmer palettes that I've ever seen put together, ever. And the formula is that astounding. The shimmers in this particular palette, these metallics, are bar none. There has not been another palette with shimmers like this in a really, really long time, and that's saying something. And considering that it's for the cost that it's at, that is equally as incredible. The mattes in this palette are also very well done, and I was shocked. This palette shocked me. So I got the festival palette when the festival palette came out. We reviewed that on this channel as well. I'll put the link up here somewhere so that you guys can go back and refresh your memory if you'd like to on the festival palette. The festival palette was very bright colors, so I thought if they were going to fail with their formula, it was definitely going to be this. So this is the festival palette, and you guys, this palette was a home run. The shimmers in this are amazing. There are several duochromes in this that are equally as stunning. The mattes in this were done very well, and for a very bright colored palette, this was done very, very nicely. This little ditty also only cost $18, and I think at the time I actually got it on sale for like $15, but regularly I believe this is $18, and for that price, it's kind of unbelievable. So I was very, very happy with the festival palette. Now both of those palettes are kind of special type palettes for BH Cosmetics. It's not their standard everyday type of palette. Both of them came out with their own individual launches. It was kind of a big deal. So I thought maybe they were just stepping it up and doing these really nice creative palettes when they have, you know, a big launch going on or some kind of big season to celebrate, and they're not putting that kind of work in their everyday palettes, because I still saw those tin palettes and I just wasn't willing to get any of them. Well, they had a new palette that came out, and it's called the Nouveau Neutrals, and I thought, you know, this is going to be a good palette to test. It's a 26 pan palette. It also has blushes in it as well. It looks like it would be something that would be more of a standard everyday kind of palette, and I thought, you know what, this will be a good test to see if this is going to be consistent with them, or if they're, you know, kind of that ucky formula that I remember in those tins from a really long time ago. So I went ahead and got it. This particular palette is only $16 for 26 pans. And it includes blushes as well. So I thought this would be a good time to check out eyeshadow and blush from BH Cosmetics. So this is what it looks like. It comes in this very nice package. It has all 26 shadows here and then the blushes here across the bottom. So the packaging looks really, really nice, especially for $16. I mean, you can't complain. And then it has like this rose gold etching down here at the bottom. It's a very nice carton on the outside. And then inside, it's a white, and it's just like a plastic. It reminds me of the Morphe palettes, the way the plastic is. It's just a plastic palette that looks like this on the front, and it's just very sleek. It's this white cream color with the rose gold etching down here at the bottom that just says Nouveau Neutrals 26 color shadow and blush palette. It's very, very pretty. I think they're trying to be very, very French on this as well. And then when you open the palette itself, it actually, one of the concerns that I had was that they don't label their shadows. Now, in the Festival palette, they actually labeled their shadows, and I was so excited. In this one, when you open it, this is what you see. You see the BH Cosmetics emblem here, which is actually really nice. And then you get this plastic insert, and it doesn't have any color names at all. So none of these eyeshadows are named anything. This cover sheet actually tells you what the finish of each one of these shadows are. So for example, it says matte, matte, soft shimmer, metallic, matte, soft shimmer, metallic, metallic, and then it tells you on the blush down here as well. Matte, 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 and a soft shimmer when it comes to the blush. So it tells you what the finish is of each of them, but it doesn't actually name the colors, which is a downside for me, but not too picky. Alright, so this is what the pan itself looks like. I think the colors themselves are gorgeous. I love a good neutral palette. I think the colors in this are really, really pretty. It has a lot of those champagne and coral and berry and brown tones. It definitely is a palette that you could use to go from day to night, and it's just a good neutral palette. So I liked it at first glance, and I actually do like the blush choices down here as well, because I think this will be skin tone friendly. While there are a couple on here that I don't think will fit my skin tone, there are some that I think will fit my skin tone, and the ones that I don't think will fit my skin tone I can use as eyeshadow, and vice versa. So I really like that idea of the blushes being along the bottom and just kind of having it all in one palette. But the question is, how good is it? So I will go over some swatches with you guys first. So let's go into the swatches. So just like we did in the last video, guys, I think I'm going to do it the same way in this video and go by finish, with mattes being first. So I'm going to do the shadows, and we're going to do all of the mattes. And the matte formula from a swatch perspective in this looks okay. Wasn't anything that blew me away like the Zodiac palette or like the Festival palette. I was actually a little disappointed in the swatches on the matte formula. So next, let's go into the soft shimmers. Now, I really do like soft shimmer. I just love the finish of these. It's not quite a metallic. It's not quite a matte. So you actually can get away with using a soft shimmer just about anywhere. And they have just this really beautiful, subtle sheen to them. Now, the soft shimmer formula, I actually do like in this, just from a swatch perspective. The soft shimmers, I believe, are actually quite beautiful in this palette. And then, of course, next we have the metallics. Now, the metallics in here are just stunning. They're not as opaque as the Zodiac palette metallics were, but they are beautiful on their own. I will say that much about them. They really are pretty. And then, of course, you have the 5 blush colors. I do think these are beautiful tones. You can't really tell a lot about a blush from an actual swatch, but just so you can see the different colors, here are the different blushes. Now, I will say this about the swatches. I was very underwhelmed by the swatches, and that was actually a little disappointing for me. The swatches from the Festival palette, mattes in the Festival palette, were stunning. The mattes in the Zodiac palette were stunning. These mattes were okay. They were okay. The metallics in this palette and the soft shimmers, I think, are beautiful. The metallics in this palette, especially after the metallics in the Zodiac palette, and then the metallics, those bright colors they put in the Festival palette, and then the metallics in this palette. From the swatches, it looks like there's some inconsistency there. So, of course, the all-important test becomes the eyes and actual application. So I'll show you what the application itself looked like here, and of course this is the look that I'm wearing tonight. So I have worn this palette for a couple of days, and I will say this: the longevity of the color is fantastic. You put a primer on just like normal, and the eyeshadow lasts you great throughout the course of the day. It just lasts fine. When you're applying it, there is a lot of kick up in the pan. It is very powdery, which I don't mind as long as there is a good pigment payoff. I did find that there is a good pigment payoff with these shadows, but it does require you to build. If you really want to get, you know, a nice pretty look out of these, and I wanted to lean a little more towards the plum colors in here, and I wanted to put like that really pretty cranberry metallic right on the lid. And I will say the cranberry metallic, when I first applied it, I just did it dry and it was okay. Once I used the Fix Plus with it, boy, it kicked it up a notch, and it actually applied a little bit better, so I was a little more satisfied with that. So it worked. They worked. They blended out nicely. It took a little bit of extra elbow work to get in there and really build up the formula, but overall it gave me a really nice, pretty eye look, and I enjoy it. I've enjoyed it this week, and I enjoyed putting this look together. So here's the thing about this palette. I don't feel like it's as good as the Festival palette. I do not feel like it's as good as the Zodiac palette. But you have to keep in mind that this is a $16 palette that has 26 pans in it. So, even though I was a little underwhelmed by the performance of the eyeshadows, I mean, for the value, it's a decent eyeshadow palette. I'll tell you kind of what my issues are towards the end, but first let's look at blush application. So I actually picked just one of the pinkier blushes, and I will say that the blushes were actually quite pigmented. I was like, woo, at first. We had some bright cheeks going on, and I had to tamp it down just a little bit, but I wanted you to see how the blush itself applies. Now, I've worn this blush through the course of the week last week, and it wears very, very nicely. It lasts throughout the course of the day. It's not one of those blushes that you put on and then at lunchtime when you go check on yourself in the mirror, you're like, oh man, my blush is gone or my highlight's gone. This blush actually stays put, and when I went to take my makeup off at the end of the evening, my blush was still there, which is fantastic in a blush. I also like the fact that of the 5 blushes, 4 of them are mattes. For someone like me who doesn't like a lot of glitter or shimmer in my blush because of texture issues, it just accentuates fine lines and wrinkles and any kind of texture that I have. So I prefer to have a nice matte blush. So for me, I love the fact that 4 of the 5 were mattes. That is perfect for me. I loved the BH Cosmetics blush formula. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it, and you get 5 blushes in this palette. That alone for me is worth it. I love the blush formula. So I think here's my issue with the shadow formula. I think once I've experimented and played with the Zodiac palette, and then I visited the Festival palette, I had a certain expectation when it came to BH Cosmetics. And I don't like inconsistency. I feel like you should be consistent across the brand. I don't know what the reason would be for not having those mattes with that punch of color like the Festival palette or even like the Zodiac palette. Just because it's a neutral color doesn't mean that you have to go light on the pigment. That way it makes your customer have to layer and layer to actually see it on the skin. So I think that somewhere along the line someone thought neutral, lighter colors means that we should go lighter on the pigment, and it just turns out to not be a good thing for us as consumers. We need that heavy pigment. The Festival palette had it, but I think they were so, you know, into those bold colors. They were really focused on making sure that that pigment was there. It's a strong, bold color. It really needs to pow and really, you know, hit the mark. But you can do that with neutral colors. So I feel like there are some real opportunities here for these colors to have really shined. So in looking at the palette itself, I think these 4 colors here, I think are very similar in tone. I think there's a couple of other colors on here that are very similar in tone. I think there could have been some different choices made that would have given a little more variety. And you can do that with a neutral palette. Just because it's a neutral palette doesn't mean you have to sacrifice variety. But I do want to show just a couple of swatches of some similar colors up against like the Festival palette, and a couple of the metallics out of this palette up against metallics out of the Zodiac palette, just so that you can see the difference. So I'll go ahead and I'll put the mattes on my arm from the Festival palette first, and then I'll swatch the neutral palette next to those colors. And I'll put the Zodiac Shimmers metallics down first, and then I'll swatch the BH metallics next to them second, so that you can see the difference. And for me, the difference is striking. I think that the consistency should have been throughout all of their cosmetics. I think it should be consistent throughout the line, and I don't think that's too much to ask. So for me, overall, it's hard for me to say that this particular palette was a disappointment. At $16, I absolutely love the blushes. I love the soft shimmers. I wish the mattes were formulated a little bit better, and I wish the metallics were as good as the metallics in the Zodiac palette. So overall, it was a disappointment for me. Was it as bad as that experience that I had a couple of years ago with those old metallic palettes that they had? Absolutely not. So I think we can safely say that BH Cosmetics is definitely trying to step up their game. I'm not going to Erika approve this particular palette just yet, simply because I think there is a lot of room for improvement. But it is a $16 palette, and it's not a bad product. So I will say that as a little disclaimer. But overall, definitely a disappointment, especially after the Zodiac and the Festival palette, and then a neutral palette, and the neutral palette was just kind of wah, wah, wah. Nobody says that a neutral palette that you have to sacrifice pigment. Here's a perfect example of a neutral palette where pigment was not sacrificed and the metallics are still banging and the pigment is still banging. Granted, this is almost a $50 palette because it's the good old soft glam, but it can be done. Nobody says that neutrals have to be soft and lacking in pigment, lacking in punch when it comes to product. Yeah, so I don't know. I just felt a little let down by this one, guys. Not my favorite palette from BH Cosmetics. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'm definitely curious to hear your all's opinion on this particular palette. As always, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I really, really, really enjoy hanging out with you guys. It's so much fun for me. If you guys enjoy the work I do and like to support this channel, there will be a link in the credits so that you can do so. Other than that, I hope everyone is happy and healthy, and I will see you guys later in the week. And don't forget, we have a contest coming up, so we'll be going over that later on this week as well. As always, have a good night. I love you guys. Mwah.